What's going on, ladies and gents? JV Wins and Dogon SS once again are here for another edition of the Conscious Approach podcast channel on YouTube. Thank you for joining, and thanks to everybody who's been joining the tribe. We certainly appreciate it. We got a lot of pretty decent feedback from our Andre 3000 story from last week, and that was actually a good topic. So, thanks to everybody who has joined along. Hit that subscribe button so that you can get that notification whenever new content is published to this channel. Thank you for supporting our brand of logical content. And if you have not already done so and you happen to catch wind of any of the content published to this channel, go ahead and do your boys a solid. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We are enjoying building our brand of community here. So we certainly appreciate you joining us along for the ride. Thank you very much. Now, of course, with those pleasantries out of the way, we'll get right into it. First up, we are going to talk about Jim Irsay. So, for anyone who doesn't know who this gentleman is, this guy is the owner of the Indianapolis Colts NFL franchise. His name is Jim Irsay. He's owned the team since the 2000s. I want to say like 2004 or five. And he was recently doing an interview with HBO Sports. And you know what has him going kind of viral is comments that he made stemming from his 2014 arrest for DUI. He seems to be under the belief that he was profiled for being a rich white billionaire. And he thinks that his status as a rich white billionaire is the reason why he was pulled over and eventually arrested for DUI. So these are obviously interesting comments, especially in this day and age. And it's going to get a lot of people talking because people are going to find it hard to believe that an individual can think that they are being profiled for being rich, number one, and white, number two. So we'll go ahead and provide a little context real quick so that you can hear this from the horse's mouth, albeit briefly. So this article says Colts owner Jim Irsay claims 2014 arrest was because he's a white billionaire. Speaking with HBO Sports, Colts owner Jim Irsay claimed that his 2014 arrest for driving under the influence was the result of prejudice. Quote, I am prejudiced against because I am a rich white billionaire. If I'm just the average guy down the block, they're not pulling me in. Of course not. I don't care what it sounds like. It's the truth. I could give a damn what people think, how anything sounds or sounds like. The truth is the truth. And I know the truth, Irsay said. Furthermore, Irsay claimed his inability to pass a sobriety test was due to a recent hip surgery, not intoxication. However, Irsay would later plead guilty to a misdemeanor charge. Irsay, who took over as owner of the Colts from his father in 1995, so mid-1990s, not 2000s, was arrested in an Indianapolis suburb in March 2014. A subsequent toxicology report found oxycodone, hydrocodone, and alprazolam, however you pronounce that, alprazolam in Irsay's system. While Irsay claimed that they were prescriptions for post-surgery recovery, he has also been open about his battles with addiction in the past. So we'll go ahead and play this sound. It's a brief snippet from that interview, and we'll let Irsay talk about how he thinks he was profiled in that instance because he was a rich white billionaire.
I am prejudiced against because I'm a rich white billionaire. If I'm just the average guy down the block, they're not pulling me in. Of course.
I know what it's going to sound like if you say they're prejudiced against a rich white billionaire.
I don't care what it sounds like. It's the truth. I don't, Andre, I could give a damn what people think, how anything sounds or sounds like. The truth is the truth. And I know that.
Whoa.
All right. So, yeah, he stumbled a little bit with his words there, kind of
little
like
bit.
Joe. Yeah, so did a little Joe Biden impression there for a second. But yeah, so there you go, man. This guy thinks that he was profiled for being a rich white billionaire. I thought that these were interesting comments, but what do you think about his belief that he was profiled for being a rich white billionaire?
I agree with him. So I think that you don't hear that about that kind of profiling, but I'm sure that that's a profile kind of thing. So Yeah, it's possible. So, when you think of celebrities and billionaire people or whatever, generally they can like, get away with it. So I'm not too sure how he couldn't like weasel his way out of this. But the mere fact that they can make a case out of somebody, for instance, because they're a celebrity, because of their status, I can see that. Now I don't know if they said that, there goes Ursay. Let's put. I think it was just a private regular stop. But then, once they got up on the stop, then it was like, oh, this is Ursay, and he's on some oxycodone. He looked like he was in oxycodone right there.
He did, yeah.
Yeah, bro. All that jigging he was doing, not looking up, and I was like, hey, man, what's this guy on right now? But but yeah, I think that there could be a profiling up there. Who knows? But most of them, I think they can just get away with it. Last thing I'll say before you go, you know, when we're dealing with America, the corporation of America, it's a very sophisticated board game, of Monopoly, if you will. And if you know how to play the game and you do the right things, well then you become one of these guys, one of the billionaires. So once you're one of the billionaires, I'm pretty sure there's levels of being a target, if you will, or what have you. But that's what I was saying. I would think that they were like above the law kind of a thing. But the mere fact that it was like, oh, there goes Ursay's car, he's swerving a bit, he was probably swerving because he was on that stuff. So I think that he can say that he got profiled, but I can agree with it. But at the same time, I feel as though it wasn't like racial profiling. It's it's
Right.
it's it's really because it was like, oh, this is a status person. I think status people catch a bad rap and when they get in public more than people would imagine. So I think this falls in that bucket. What about you, man? How do you feel about this situation with Ursay saying that he was profiled for being a white billionaire?
Yeah, I think the part that'll have him getting criticized by people for his comments is the white part. Because, how this, the way the world is now, if you are going to invoke the use of words like profiled and discriminated, those terms tend to nowadays be reserved for select groups of people. And if you are someone who is outside of those select groups of people, it's like you're disqualified from being able to use those words to describe a situation or circumstance that happened to you. So I think what's going to get people hot and bothered about what he had to say was that he used the word white. Because what people are going to instantaneously do is connect his whiteness with the idea of being profiled. And they are going to say, you're white, you can't be getting profiled because white people don't get profiled. I think that's what the general public is going to do. People who take issue with his comments and people who tend to, fall in line with social justice ideology. But I don't think that for him to say he was profiled, it would suggest that he believes that an injustice was done unto him, right? Because why would you use that word if you don't think that there was something done to you unjustly? And so the question therein becomes, okay, well, how do we define that? So the way that I look at this is the question becomes, has what is taking place in the social discourse and the media spilled over into actual practice by institutions such as law enforcement, for example? We've talked on this channel several times in the past, citing different examples of how there's an element taking place in the media in particular, in which it has become socially acceptable for you to say something that is in some way, shape, or form denigrating, in particular, heterosexual white men. Because the idea is heterosexual white men have long since been the establishment. They are a part of what is wrong with America. And so it is okay for us to take them down a peg and treat them however we feel like it because they're the establishment. And so that's justice being done. Let's take the establishment down. If you put a different person, if you put a female, if you put a black person, if you put a Latino person, if you put any other marginalized group in that position, an LGBTQ person, they're going to be protected from those same exact types of criticisms. But the minute that it becomes a white man first and then a white woman second, it's socially acceptable to sort of castigate them because intrinsically, collectively, we have decided that's the establishment, and so they can be taken down a peg in ways that if it were going on with a different type of person, we would perceive it to be unjust. But if we're talking about straight white guy, it's not unjust. It's comeuppance. It's well earned. It's deserved. And so I do believe that that's always been an element of the media. But the question is whether that is now an element in everyday real life, where it's like this stuff is actually happening in practice. And if you ask him, he'll say it is because he believes that he was profiled 100%. I don't know. I do know that when it comes to the mainstream media, this is something that is happening. So, and you've mentioned the coach, you've used the analogy of sports with coaches, or, like an announcer can't say that a black coach sucks because then that announcer may have to answer questions as to whether he is latently racist. But if it's a white coach who's performing his job just as badly, it's okay. No one's going to question whether there is any sort of agenda behind it.
Mhm.
And I think that goes on in the mainstream media, not just with sports, but everywhere. If it's an actor that we're talking about, if it's another rich person who we're talking about, if it's some benefactor, if it's somebody who's being looked at, scrutinized in some kind of way, if it's a white guy, it's like, hey man, they're white, so have at it. It's open season. And if it's one who's not white, it's like, oh well, is this racist in any kind of way? Are there racial undertones as a result of this criticism? These questions sort of come up, and to me, it presents the idea that there is a possible double standard taking place. Now, is one right? Is one right or wrong? I don't know. I'm just kind of observing what's taking place. I kind of feel like everything's fair game. If you're shitty at what you're doing, or if what you're doing is shitty, it deserves to be scrutinized, no matter what your background is or where you come from. But I do think that there is a large element in the media, in particular, that has accepted that scrutiny, even if it's unjust or unfair, is more acceptable depending on the profile of the individual being scrutinized. And if that profile happens to be white male heterosexual in particular, it's more okay than not. And second behind that guy is white female heterosexual, then it's more okay than not. And the question is whether that spilled over into the streets. I don't know, but if you ask Irsay, he's saying that it spilled over into the streets.
That's a possibility. I looked at it more like in the sense of the police were, because it might be a thing where, for instance, Boosie always complains about, I think, driving in Louisiana or something, or was it in Georgia? I'm not too sure. It was just like a certain town or something where every time he's in there, he's getting pulled over. So I don't know if it was a thing where he was in his home state, home area, whatever, and they know his car, and he felt as though, they were constantly, dealing with him because they know it's his vehicle. And probably the one day they caught him slipping was the day they hit him on charges. So at that point, he probably could be talking about that, especially if he's not in some inner circle or connection, because this is a whole different game he's playing. So this isn't like regular, people stuff. So everybody knows who he is. He's got money for power and all these other things. I mean, he's running a whole sports organization. So I'm not too sure where he was at in his life or whatever for him to be feeling that way, but I'm pretty sure he felt targeted. And yeah, I don't know, it's because he was a white billionaire. He was just targeted because whatever, I probably think. but I don't think they just go around pulling around white billionaires. That's not how the game go.
I don't think so either. I don't think so either.
No, so I think this was some local Ozarks kind of whatever thing where they were probably dealing with him a little too much for his liking, or he just felt like they were following him or whatever. Just leave me alone. Why is it? Because I'm me, and whatever. Because he comes off as quite eccentric. So I don't know how he does with interpersonal stuff, but yeah, I think that was more or less some in town in city politics. But I still feel as though people across all spectrums could get profiled for various reasons. And so whether we like it or not, there's some truths and some stereotypes, and there's just truths and normal generalities. And as sucky as it may sound, they've algorithmically tried to figure out ways to profile each race. I get lumped in there too. I don't think it's okay, but I just know that they go black man, dark car, dark windows. What's he up to? That's I'm already feeling that way. You know, but versus when I was driving in a Prius, you know what I'm saying? I'm driving in a Prius, still dark windows, but it was a white Prius, or it was a gray Prius, and I just felt different in there. For all they know, I was sipping a latte, eating root grass or something, at some hipster area. They don't know who's in there. I'm not gonna pop out. So it's just like, all right, just let that go. But hey, Chevy, all black, they gonna do that because they feel like there's a cookie under that rock. So that they do that. I'm not saying that's okay, but I think every group has their own. I think we got a lot, but I think every group has their own kind of thing. So for his billionaire group, they knew who he was. They probably knew he was on that stuff because he just looks like a druggie, and so they probably just wanted some extortion. I don't know what they was into, but yeah, but I think everybody can get profiled for various reasons. But I don't think that his whole situation here was because he was a white billionaire. That's a bit of a stretch because they're not doing that. So I think they just had it out for him.
Yeah, I don't think they're doing that either. But you know how it is when he uses the word profile collectively with his whiteness, it's going to trigger people
Oh
because
yeah.
then it's going to start this dialogue about the merit of his comments with respect to the very concept of what qualifies one to be profiled. And no one thinks of it the way that well, not no one, but I would say most people don't think of it in terms of the way that you explained it, which is true. It happens to different groups in various capacities, but I think most people nowadays think of the word profile and they instantly go to race, and what will add fuel to the fire in terms of this particular story is the fact that he himself invocated his whiteness. He said white. If he had just left it at billionaire, people might still want to scrutinize his comments. But when you bring in the fact that you're white, you're opening up a can of worms now, because now you're going to have people who are seizing upon the idea that you believe that it's possible to be profiled despite the fact that you're rich and white. And I think that you still can be, but I think the majority of the world looks at that as nonsense. Especially nowadays, they look at that as a nonsensical point of view. They think that it is impossible to be profiled in any capacity if you are white, let alone rich and white. So that's kind of where the conversation becomes confusing. But I'm not surprised that he's the one that made this thing, that made these confusing comments or said these confusing comments, because he is an eccentric dude. He really is. He is kind of out there in no man's land in terms of some of the stuff that he says sometimes. And the way he runs his organization too, if you want to look at that.
Exactly.
But I think that they were interesting comments nevertheless, because if you have any kind of awareness about the times that you are living in, you have to know how saying white and profile is going to be received by the majority of the world, even other white people who are, social justice warriors. So I don't know if it, like I said, I wasn't there. So right or wrong, fair or unfair, or however you want to sort of tag the merit of his comments, I agree with you. There's profiling going on everywhere. So they could have just been targeting him, because sometimes these rich people do kind of get hemmed up by people who just have it out for him for whatever reason. Whether it has anything to do with his whiteness is another story, and I think that's where
Right.
it gets,
I don't know.
and that's
That's
where I
yeah.
think it gets. That's where I think it gets a little murky.
Hmm.
But either way, shouts out to Jim Irsay. At least he
Funny
knows
dude.
how to hire good coaches who know how to run organizations, and good front office people, because the Colts just stay winning games even though on paper it looks like they shouldn't be.
Mhm.
So I'll give you credit for that, man. But these comments were a little wacky, bro.
funny cat, man.
Yeah, he is.
Sheesh.